This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway To Shea Podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets, episode 144. Before we get started with the show, shout out to 30 people already in the room, ready to talk, ready to chat. Excited to have you all in here. As you see below, make sure to follow Subway To Shea on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway To Shea. You can follow me on X at AntRivera86 and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and probably what you're doing right now on YouTube. I got to welcome back my friend to the show, guest co-hosting with me tonight, Dexter Henry, sports anchor for New York Post Sports and SNY, update anchor, WFAN and Infinity Sports Network, and the host of the New York Sports Rapid Rundown and New York Got Game. Dexter, a man of all trades, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. I'm doing better than the Mets, Anthony. That's for sure. Goodness. Better than the Mets. I got to my first Met game last night, and it wasn't good. It wasn't good in terms of watching. It wasn't good at all.
You know, I was hoping, and we're going to get into Darryl Strawberry today because that was a big part of this setup here and getting you on the podcast. We've been talking about Darryl Strawberry since the announcement about the number retirement ceremony back in, I think, late August, early September, you know, and I wanted this to really be a positive, happy podcast this week because, you know, Darryl is just so important to this organization and what this team has done throughout the organization. Really, the last time that I guess this team owned the city of New York was when Darryl was here. And the last time we had an actual consistent winner. I'm not talking about that 2015-26 run or the 2006 through 2008, not even 99-2000, a real run from about 1984 to 1990. And you can go all the way back to the beginning of it, like the rebuilding era, 1980, when they drafted Darryl Strawberry. Mm-hmm. So, and it's just frustrating that it can't be just fully about that, which I wanted it to be, because, man, this Mets team is just frustrating as all can possibly be. I want to use expletives, but I won't do it on the show. It's just, I don't even like, it's hard to fathom what we've been going through this entire season. And you can date it all the way back to the end of the 2022 season when they lost to the Braves, and then into the playoffs when they lost to the Padres. This team has not been able to catch its mojo or, you know, just get on the right track since then. And we last year thought that June swoon was the problem, but we're in May Day right now, because in May, this team is already 11 games under 500. It got worse. We lost Brooks Raley for the season. We haven't seen Kodai Senga yet. And now Edwin Diaz. We'll start off with Edwin Diaz. He's been placed on IL, 15-day IL, right shoulder impingement. You look at his stats this season, they haven't been good. He's 1-1, 5.40 ERA, 30 strikeouts in 20 innings pitched. He has 5 saves, but in 9 opportunities. So he's blown 4 saves already. I think 3 of them in a week. In the last 6 innings that he's had, 11.37 ERA, 10 hits, 8 earned runs, 3 walks, and only 9 strikeouts. Look, I don't know if this is, I'm not going to say this is this phantom IL stint to try to get him to re-energize and refocus, because there is a possibility that coming off of this knee injury, that he is compensating and putting a lot of strain on that shoulder here. And John Mincone posted this on Twitter. The shoulder injury after knee injury is not ideal. His knee is throwing him off somewhere. The Mets pitching and medical staff need to get on this ASAP before it becomes truly career altering. So, you know, what are your thoughts on what is conspire? I can't think of the word. What are your thoughts on what has
transpired?
Yeah, transpired.
What has transpired?
Yeah, what has transpired with Edwin Diaz?
Yeah, man. And what I think is tough for the Met fan, Anthony, is that Diaz looked good in the start, right? Like, he came back and was like, all right, Diaz is back, looks good. And I think fans were excited about that. Then you've seen the struggles. You kind of mentioned it there. When I saw the news of this injury today, I immediately thought to myself, oh, is this one of these? Okay, he's injured. We're going to send him down. And I don't, we know organizations do this sometimes to get a guy right, give him some time away to clear his head, things like that. That does happen. I don't know that for sure. So I don't want to fully speculate. I haven't spoken to anybody. I haven't heard that for sure. However, it does make sense if he was overcompensating because of the knee injury and has put more strain on his shoulder. This is a possibility. Now, when you hear that stuff and you hear this could be career altering, I believe that was the words that was used there. That's a major concern. The thing for me initially was his confidence looked shot. And, it could be mechanical, could be physical in terms of that. And then you saw the confidence shot. I do think, regardless of this, first thing I always like to say in situations like this is Edwin Diaz, we hope that he's healthy and gets back right and is fine. We could definitely hope that. And I mean that in both ways, mentally and physically, and that he can then come back and get the confidence to pitch the way we've seen him pitch before. But I actually think that if this is indeed an injury, maybe the breakaway is good for him for multiple reasons, because you do not want this to get worse than what it is. Obviously, if you're a Mets fan, and secondly, for him to just also reset and refocus, being away from the game, come back healthy, and then develop those mechanics in the way that we know that he can pitch. So is it a blow for the Mets? Yes, because you wanted to see him figure these things out and try to get stuff right, Anthony? And then this comes a setback, but I'm wondering if this is a good thing. Now, here's the thing for the Mets. Him being out hasn't helped the bullpen, right? The bullpen, got a little overworked in the first month of the season here in April. You've seen some of the effects of that now. Now you're asking Ottavino and others to get the job done and close the door. We saw in the first game on Tuesday, not able to get that done. That's a struggle for the Mets. And the bigger struggle is, you got the starters who aren't giving you innings the way the fans would like to see there. So it's tough all around. It's a big blow for the Mets. And you wonder how it affects the rest of the team, Anthony, psychologically, because you and I were talking about before we came on here, this team has looked listless. They've looked uninspired. They have not looked like they've had any fight. I do not think that this team, based on talent, folks, is a team that should be 11 games below 500. I don't think anybody, even if you're the most pessimistic Mets fan in the world, you did not think that this team would be 11 games under 500 in June. So I just wonder now with the struggles that we've seen from Diaz, him now being out at least for 15 days at a minimum, I wonder how that affects the team. If the Mets are going to show some fight, they're going to need to really do this. These next 2 to 3 weeks are important. I think we'll get into that, but they've got to show it now. But this isn't good news for the Mets. But I hope it's good for Edwin Diaz in terms that he can actually right the ship and get healthy and then work on what he needs to work on.
We pretty much saw last season with Edwin Diaz being out from the beginning that this team just, wasn't the same. They even had the help of David Robertson, who pitched very well to me, right out the bat, right out the gate. And with the starting pitching, not being able to go 3-4 innings at the max, that this bullpen was tired by early June. And it seems, even with the starting pitcher can be a lot better this year, that the bullpen is just extremely exhausted. And now the fact that Edwin Diaz is out only makes things even worse. This is a tough stretch that the Mets are going on. I know that people were, some people said, let's give it to June 15th. Let's see where they are by July 4th. To me, and I said this last week, this homestand was crucial. And they are 1-5, could have been 0-6 if they did not come back in the bottom of the ninth against the Giants on Sunday. So look, it's very frustrating for this team not to come together and find a way to fight. Because like you said, every day there's a different kind of loss for this team. They're finding new ways to lose, uninspiring baseball. The offense is consistently inconsistent. And, you when you get good pitching, you can check off the hitting not being good and vice versa. And then when they're both good, the bullpen's not good. So this team can't find a way to get out of their own, and it's very frustrating to see. I appreciate everyone that's in the chat right now, even with this team being as bad as it is right now. And you can easily turn the channel, find something else to do. Earlier, we had the Knicks playing. We have the Rangers trying to get to the Stanley Cup. Football's getting ready to start in about a month and a half or two. And baseball here, at least in Queens, might be irrelevant by the time we get to July 4th. But you guys are here. 132 of you are in here. Shout out to Patty and NYC. Maureen is in here. Brad, appreciate you for being here. Rosie K is in here. Eddie Presti from the Morning Brew Sports Network is in here. Eddie's a good guy, and it will be on the Mets Evening Brew tomorrow night. There'll be a lot to talk about there as well. So appreciate everyone for tuning in here. Rosie K saying, thanks for being so positive. You have no idea how I want to not be positive. And we talked about that off air, but I'm trying to break.
It's a struggle. It's a struggle, Rosie. It's a struggle.
It's definitely a struggle. And like I told Dexter off air, I have already started my preliminary, who to trade list at the trade deadline. So, and Eddie Presti says it, this team is cooked. They need a full rebuild. No one in free agency will be able to save them. And he's got a point to that, because I've been saying this. I even said this at the beginning of the season, and we might have talked about this on the Rapid Rundown, where, it even involved Yamamoto, right? The fact that this team has not found a winning culture, it doesn't matter how much money Steve Cohen is throwing at you. If you can get a little lesser deal from a better team like the Dodgers, the New York Yankees, the Braves, they're going to take that, because this Mets organization has not shown that winning culture yet. And even if you had traded Pete and all these guys, it was imperative for this team to end the season on a high note, to end the season with a winning record. And it doesn't look like they're getting that. They're already 11 games under 500. I think they are four spots away from the number one pick in the draft. So, I mean, look how far this has come. They're only 4 games ahead of the Miami Marlins, who are in last place, and they completely broke that team in the end of April. So, we're in a struggle here, but when you look at who should be the closer, and you guys can answer this in the chat as well, is it I guess it's closer by committee. When I look at the pitchers,
it's gotta be.
When I look at the pitchers in the bullpen, the only guys I could see closing, and I don't say this with 100% confidence either, these are the guys that I would have to give the ball to. You got Reed Garrett, Jake Diekman, Jorge Lopez, who kind of had a mini meltdown, throwing his glove into the stands in the final game against the Dodgers. And then you got Sean Reed Foley as well. The guys I wouldn't give it to, Adam Ottavino, Josh Walker, and obviously Adrian Hauser, who I think is not going to be on this team for much longer. But, how do you handle this closer thing until Edwin Diaz comes back? And who even knows, with the shoulder impingement, we don't even know if he'll come back this season.
That's another thing, right? You don't know if he'll come back. How do you handle it? It's interesting. You said you don't want to see Ottavino. You sound like a friend of mine knows. Like, I don't want to see any more of Ottavino in late game situations, especially closing. It feels like Garrett, if I had to give it to a guy, I might want to see him get a shot at it. But I think it's going to be by committee. I think Mendoza is going to try to figure this out, feel this out game for game. If somebody emerges, right, and you see some consistent performances, I think that's what you should be looking for here, Anthony, is can you see consistent performances going forward and then take it from there? But, I mean, there's nobody really that you can put a finger on and say, hey, this guy inspires so much confidence. I think we have to put him in the closer's role right now. So, look, I'll look at it. I'm going to try to be positive. I'm going to try to be positive for the people, okay? In situations like this, in any sport, but particularly in baseball, you have a chance for guys to step up. If somebody wants to show that they are a good back of the end bullpen guy, here's your chance. We'll see who steps up. Somebody's got to fight and step up for this. But here's the concern. You and I are talking about, Anthony, this team looks listless and lifeless, right? Outside of it, I don't want to be too Debbie Downer, because we did see Tyler McGill pitch a really good game in that first game on Tuesday, and he looked really good. And I thought that start was very important for him and his development. And then Christian Scott has also obviously been such a bright spot here for the Mets, where I think Mets fans have to actually be excited about him. And I like his makeup. I really do. But in terms of this now in the bullpen, somebody's got to step up. Who's the leader in this bullpen? I mean, I don't even know who the leader on this team is. That's another question we can get into.
100% agree. I have no idea. To me, there is really no lead. And I'm not talking about, the way Lindor goes and checks on the players, goes to the, there seems to be, to me, and I'm not coming out this as a salicata saying, Pete Alonso trouble. I'm not, trying to say that there's something in the clubhouse, but there is something that is not right with this team in this clubhouse. I don't know if they are really playing for the name in the front of the jersey. I think they're playing for the name right now in the back of the jersey, and they're playing for the baseball card.
But who's that on, Anthony? When we talk about that, it's funny because I had a conversation with a Met fan at the game yesterday after the game, the second game, and I was having some deeper conversations following this conversation I'm talking about. But is that on the manager? And I think when I say that, I want people to be clear. Carlos Mendoza is a first-year manager. This is really hard to come over and take a team. And I'm not sitting here making excuses for him, but I'm just saying, I wonder if there is some change when you come from a Buck Showalter, who was such a strong presence and figure and had the history of winning, right? And so this is where I'm being fair. I'm not saying Carlos Mendoza can be Buck Showalter. He can't, because he's doing this for the first time. And you know what? It's not easy managing a baseball club. I just want to be very clear about that. But I just wonder if that change in voice and tone, as somebody who oversaw, lack of a better term, the clubhouse there, that's some of the difference that we're seeing. Is this the effect of Buck not being here, where we're not seeing some of the production? Now, I'm going to caution and pause myself a little bit on that, because there are vets in that clubhouse. Okay, Anthony? There's vets there. And the vets that are high-price vets are not performing. Lindor's been terrible. Alonso's been terrible. McNeil's been terrible. Those guys have not performed. And you would think they have enough in terms to perform and get there. But I don't know if there's a route. I don't want to say there's bad leadership. I just don't know if there's a guy that gets things going for them. And I think Buck kind of steadied the ship for that. I think we're seeing some of the effects of Buck not being there. That's not a dig at Mendoza, who I think is doing an okay job as a man. It's not his. This is not his fault. Players have to go and perform. They're not performing. But I just wonder if there's sort of something missing once Buck left. It's just me thinking out loud. I don't know what you think about that, but I'd love to hear what you think about it, Anthony.
Well, you can go back, right? Go back and look at all the signs, right? I like to go back to 2019, right? Because that's when some of these kids, you had Nimmo in the lineup, you had Pete Alonso come up, you had Jeff McNeil come up. And, they had Mickey Callaway to start off as manager. To go from Mickey Callaway to, Beltran for like 30 days. And then to Luis Rojas, who kind of allowed the players to run roughshod, right? You had the Jonathan VRs of the world, Javi Baez, Marcus Stroman. The team was lingering around, and Steve Cohen needed to get these players back on task and back in the good graces of the fans. Because, with the thumbs down stuff and, all the things that was happening, Stroman on social media, all that stuff, it needed to be nipped in the bud. So what did he do? He went and he hired Buck Showalter. On top of that, he got a veteran presence and leader in Max Scherzer as well. And I think that combination, because I know Max Scherzer was signed first and he wanted to have Buck Showalter as the manager. So, that 2022, really good season until the end, where they kind of fell apart there. I don't know if by September they kind of stopped buying into what Buck was doing. Because remember, Buck was having them play really good baseball. They were doing things like stealing third when the pitcher wasn't paying attention. He had all the details down pat for this team to get them to 101 wins. And then we go to 2022. They don't get off to 2023, they don't get off to the good start, a lot due to the injuries to the pitching. They had to replace DeGrom. They brought Verlander in, and he's hurt to start the season. And the team gets off to a rough start. The bullpen falls apart, and the team's kind of lingering around. But Epler decides to sell at the deadline. And if you saw the press conferences, Scherzer was not happy about it. Verlander wasn't happy about it. Nimmo was in shock. Pete was in shock. Lindor was kind of like, this is what happens in baseball, and we got to be prepared for everything, which I thought was a fine answer. Then you go to this year. They get rid of Buck and they go to Carlos Mendoza, new manager, which I didn't want to fire Buck, but I knew it had to be done. You bring in a new president of baseball operations. He wants his own guys. Totally understand the whole situation. But now you look at the team, actually, to me, is playing worse than what they did with the Rafael Ortegas and Jonathan Ruizes of the world. That team was playing 500 at the end of the season. That if they had an Edwin Diaz, they probably would have made the third wild card if they had an Edwin Diaz, because that bullpen blew probably so many saves. But they were playing 500 towards the end of the season.
They were playing hard.
They were playing hard, but this team it's just lifeless. There's nothing. They had a closed door meeting after the game to address the whole thing with Jorge Lopez. This team is in such a way. I know you talked about the bright spots, and Karen Heckler brought this up. Are there any bright spots to the Mets? You mentioned McGill. Maureen agrees with that. Also, Rosie K talking about Christian Scott, Francisco Alvarez being back on the trail. So there are some bright spots. I wish they would bring back Jose Butto. I keep plugging for Jose Butto to be in this rotation. He has not been terrible. Then you throw Adrian Hauser, bad. Joey Lucchesi, bad. And now we have to sit and wait for an opportunity to bring Jose Butto up. They brought up David Peterson, who pitched okay. But yeah, this team is in a way right now. And yes, this is a kind of a therapy session for any of you Met fans here. Do me a favor. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you're subscribing to Subway To Shea. Make sure you're following Dexter as well at D Henry TV. I got that correct.
You got that correct.
Perfect. And we got a lot of stuff that's happening here. And, to top that off, the whole Edwin Diaz thing, the way the Mets have been playing, Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso gets hit in the hand. And as of right now, he got hit in the pitch. He got hit by a pitch from James Paxton during the series finale. And as of this right now, because this probably will go up on audio on Friday, but as of right now, Anthony DeComo of MLB.com said that the x-rays were negative on Pete Alonso's right hand, but the Mets won't have CT scan results until tomorrow. They need to confirm that there is no break. So obviously his hand is swollen right now. They need that swelling to go down to do the testing. Pete Alonso this season, 231 batting average, 12 home runs, 26 RBIs, 761 OPS. I've always been on Pete, about swinging at pitches at the dirt, swinging at pitches that look like they're going into the dugout. This season, he's been missing at pitches right down the plate in big spots. When we came into this offseason, where were you when it comes to, re-signing Pete Alonso or trading him? I wanted them to get this contract extension done during the offseason because I was worried that if there was an Aaron Judge type season, we would have to be overpaying big time for him. And I don't know if that's going to happen now. And there is a possibility that he could be traded. Pat Ragazzo of SI.com inside the Mets, and he got some of this according to Andy Martino during his article that last October, there was no intention to trade Pete Alonso from David Stearns, but now they think that trading him would not hurt the opportunity to re-sign him during free agency. To me, this never works. I have never seen, outside of, I think it was Aroldis Chapman, that a player gets traded and then wants to come back to the team. And it goes back to what I've been saying about having a winning culture. You're getting traded from the Mets. Let's say you get put in a better position. Let's say you go to, I don't know, the Cubs or some other contending team out there right now. Why would you want to come back here to this?
Yeah.
Why?
But this goes to, I'll answer the question, but this goes to what you were talking about with the culture, right? And what Eddie was bringing up and how the Mets, maybe they need to tear it down because they're getting free agents to come is not going to happen until people see that sort of building of a winning culture. I do think there's something to that. And I do think, I can't believe we're talking about this and it's not even June, but tearing down should be a possibility. Now, I talked to one fan who was chatting with me last night and said, yeah, I think the Mets should just tear it down. They should just trade everybody, full rebuild. And this fan also said something that was a little ridiculous to me in the fact that he said that the Mets should have, he said the Mets should tear it down and they should win a World Series, be ready to compete for a World Series by 2026. And this season, after they tear it down and they bring up some young guys, they should have 5 of their 9 everyday players on the field that would be on the 2026 World Series team. I was like, okay, we can pump the brakes a little bit on that. As far as Pete goes, he's not making a case. Nope. You know, I to keep him. Like and Mets fans, I know the Mets fans in the chat will say this, but Dex, he's a homegrown guy. We want to see a homegrown guy succeed and all that stuff. I hear you. The problem is David Stearns doesn't have any attachment. This is not a guy he drafted. This is not a guy that he saw come up through the farm system. He has no attachment. His attachment is trying to field the best roster and win. And I feel like if you're a true Mets fan, you kind of got to support that, right? Like you can't make this about we want to see the homegrown guys. You want to see this team develop and win into a World Series, be a World Series contender. And what Anthony talked about in the Strawberry era in the 80s, Mets fans would die to see 6 years of sustained success. They would love to see that 6 years where you know you're a playoff contender, you're contending for division titles, you have a chance to go to the World Series. Mets fans have not seen that in a long time. And Steve Cohen has talked about that. He's talked about wanting to be able to spend, wanting to be able to develop the farm system. Well, one of the ways they might be able to replenish the farm system is trading Pete Alonso. And Pete Alonso, let's just keep it real. I like Pete Alonso. He's been a pretty good Met, but he has not performed. He has regressed as a hitter. We have to be honest about that. He's regressed as a hitter. Anthony, you talked about it. We talked, the last 2 years, we just said, oh man, Pete's chasing these bad pitches outside. The plate discipline doesn't look great. This year, you're right. Missing things right down Broadway, not coming through in the clutch. And he's not alone in this. So I don't want to just pile on Pete because he's not alone in this year. But we have to keep it real. We got to call a spade a spade. He has not been good. Is he part of the Mets' future? Is he the kind of first baseman you can win around with somebody who doesn't hit for a decent average, is going to strike out a lot, and is shown to not be clutch? Yes, he can mash a lot of home runs. We know he's got 40 home runs in the bag if he wants to any season. But is he part of Stearns' long-term vision? The other thing, too, is here's the other part, Anthony. What he thought he was probably going to get on the open market, he ain't getting that. The price is going down. Yesterday's price is not today's price in the wrong way here for Pete Alonso. And him and his agent, Scott Boras, they were banking on him having a good season. And you had concerns about the price probably going up and the Mets overpaying, right, Anthony? That's not necessarily a concern. The Mets probably have a lot more leverage if it comes to negotiations, if they do decide to keep Pete. But I think it's fair to question, is he the kind of first baseman you want to invest into long-term for this team? And I don't know where you stand on this, Anthony, but I think if you're a Mets fan, I actually feel like it might be better for the team to just blow this up, right? I think it might be able to blow it up and just start the rebuild. You can get a haul for Pete Alonso. Somebody will give up a bunch for him. There's some other guys, mainly a lot of the guys outside of Hauser who Stearns has signed, who have been good. And I know we're talking about trades already, but you might be able to trade those guys come the trade deadline and get some good things that really can help replenish this farm system. And yes, the Mets will be putting out a AAA ball club at the end of the season. Some guys will come up, but ask yourself as a Mets fan, what is there to be excited about with this team right now? Outside of the stuff we mentioned, like Christian Scott and Colin McGill looking good the other day. But yeah,
look, I was even thinking about this today. Honestly, I don't know if this team's going to be ready until 2027, 2028. Like,
man, that's depressing. That's depressing.
I just, I've always been this super positive, super optimistic, but you look at the players right now, and you mentioned David Stearns not having any attachment to these guys. This is a showcase for them to show that you should be staying on this team and staying on this roster, and they're not doing it. Pete's not doing it. The only one that we're saddled with is Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo. And this team, it's just like it's just going through the motions. we get the same responses. We're better than this. Well, you got to show it on the field. You got time for talk is over. I stopped listening to the post-game pressers because I know it's going to be the same thing every single day. And I know it's like, oh, what are they supposed to say? But at some point, you got to do the talking on the field. And they're just not doing it. Everything just feels lackadaisical. It just feels going through the motions. And to me, honestly, some people may like this or not. It feels like they're there for the paycheck. That's the feeling that I've been getting watching this.
That's the feeling I think fans, and I have a lot of respect for, somebody who works in sports media. And look, I love sports. I'm a fan too, right? Nobody wants to feel like the players are not working out there, right? It's just like any other job. I think when I think that's a low point when fans feel like what you just said, Anthony, right? Which is, I feel like they're just collecting the check and going home. There's something else that you had said too that struck me. And one of the other things you said, you were going through the last couple of seasons and you were talking about, when Scherzer came and wanted Buck Showalter to be there. And I think one of the things that really hurts this team right now is they don't have an ace. With Senga not being out there, they don't have a true ace. They don't have somebody to stop the bleeding. Right now they're on a losing streak where they've lost 8 out of 9. They don't have somebody that you trust to stop the bleeding, they at all. And they're probably missing some leadership in terms of the pitching rotation with Senga not being there. I mean, Quintana hasn't been good. He did not pitch badly against the Dodgers in Game 2 on Tuesday. He actually was okay. That was actually a quality start from him. The offense couldn't get anything going. But, yeah, I think that hurts this team too.
Yeah.
However,
and his okay starts as an ace are good starts as a 4th or 5th starter.
Right. Not as an ace. Right. Great point there. You and I remember we were talking before the season and we were kind of on the same wavelength about this Mets team. And we said, yeah, if this team was 83 and 79, would be shocked. No, if they were 79 and 83, we also wouldn't be shocked. We thought they were somewhere above or below 500 based on the talent. And I like some of the signings Stearns made. And I thought some guys would be motivated to play well. Most of those guys actually have been. And we've seen that. The point that you're making about where you're seeing some of the veterans that are getting bigger paychecks, not looking like they're motivated to play well, that's disheartening. But I think nobody saw this team this bad. And it's like, well, what do you do? I don't want to watch the Subway To Shea podcast 30 days from now. And, everybody's like, oh, hey, Ant, what do we do? What do we trade? Who do we trade? When Anthony comes on with me and we do videos, we're talking about trades at the end of June. Like that's really depressing, but it might be where the Mets are headed if they don't show some fight and turn this around. I still think there's a team in here that can fight, but you're right, Anthony. The time for talking is over. You have to show it. Somebody in that clubhouse has to say, and it can't just be Carlos Mendoza. I want to be very clear about that. It cannot just be him. Somebody's got to say enough is enough. We just got embarrassed by the Dodgers. We found all kinds of new ways to lose. The Mets lose in a different kind of way, and nobody's shocked anymore. We're all like, oh, yep, they did it again. Somebody's got to be mad and say, it's got to stop here. Somebody's got to do it. I don't care if you want to say maybe they don't have the talent. Maybe they're going to sell people off. Maybe. But you want to see some fight. I'll be honest. I do not remember going to a Mets game in the last, I'll probably say even 3 years where the ballpark was as dead as it was last night. I mean, it was dead. It was dead.
Dexter,
people were there.
It was dead for Doc Day.
You told me that. I was watching at work and I couldn't, sometimes that doesn't translate as well on TV, but you told me that because we talked after that evening, that day. And that just tells you a lot about the fan base and how they're feeling right now. Yeah. And I feel for the Mets fan because they were excited about the last couple of seasons before this.
Yeah. No,
especially with the new ownership.
Absolutely. And look, I'm not going to tell fans to show up to the games, to not show up to the games, how to spend their money. Yeah. I just throwing out a plea to beg everyone for at least one day, just one day this Saturday, if you can, show up for Strawberry. At least for this day. If you don't come for the rest of the season, I have a ticket package, so I have to go for the rest of my tickets for this season. But please, just at least show up for Strawberry. At least, even if you just come for the ceremony. I was a little disappointed that it wasn't as packed, at least for Docs. I know it was rainy that day. It's mid-May.
Yeah, it was.
Actually, it was end of April.
End of April.
And kids are still in school, all that stuff like that. So I totally get that. Just for Straw, man, I just feel like the fans got to show out for him. Just for that. Forget about the team for a few minutes. Darryl Strawberry and what he did for this franchise. I know it didn't end well, but that run that team went on, which we'll get into shortly, was some kind of special, run for that team. Let's get into some of these comments here. And Steven Steele says, the Cardinals have had so much success developing starters by having them spend their first year in the bullpen. Why can't the Mets copy this strategy? This is something that I've been talking about for years. You look back at a guy like Adam Wainwright, and that name in this Mets lore, has a lot of standing.
Mets fans don't love that name,
but we all remember him being the closer for the Cardinals, and they actually had a closer. They had Jason Isringhausen, but he wasn't pitching good that time. Mm-hmm. So they brought in Adam Wainwright to close out games in that postseason. And I that's a thing I don't understand. Why not build these starters, from the bullpen up? Let them forget about, AAA is one of the more lesser, it's really AA than, MLB, because AAA really doesn't have that fire and that I guess that talent that you would get when you go from AA to the major leagues. So why not give these guys put Budo in the bullpen? Maybe we'll see Blade Tidwell. Maybe throw him in the bullpen for now and see what he can do, and then eventually move him up to being a starter. I don't understand why we don't see this more, especially from this Mets organization.
It's funny. I didn't know that you made that point before, but I would love that strategy. And you talk, Budo is a perfect example. You want to find a place for him to go. Okay, maybe let's see him in the bullpen. Let's see what he can do. Let's see what he can do. Maybe he could be the closer. There's no reason. The point being this: there's no reason for the Mets to not think outside the box. Where this franchise is right now, and they're trying to figure out the direction of where they're trying to go and what young players fit and who's going to be part of the core going forward. Why not? It doesn't cost you anything to do it, and it gets guys reps. You want them to face major league hitters. It gives them the opportunity to do that, to be around the major league culture, whatever that is fostering or being developed. It gives them the chance to do that. Why not? I'm for it. How can it hurt? That's the thing I'd bring up. How can this hurt them at all? I don't see what's the negative to it. I just don't see it.
Jorge Lopez Moya saying this bullpen has been overworked because the starters, and this leads back in, hardly ever go past the 5th or 6th inning, especially Jorge Lopez. Him being overworked. Got it. Okay. No. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a lot better than last year, but still not good enough, right? We're getting length out of a guy like Luis Severino. We were getting length out of Jose Butto. He was going 6 innings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I still don't understand the move. I know they needed a spot start, but the fact that, they then let him linger down there and gave Adrian Hauser a start over him. I just don't understand some of the thought process. It feels a little bit like last year where, how they kind of kept Vientos away and would not bring him up, and they would bring someone else up like they did with Ortega and Ruiz, and not give the kids. I just don't know the thought process here, but he is right. This rotation outside of Sevy and Budo giving us some starts, Minaya has been going 5 innings. He can't keep his pitch count down, although he gives you 5 good innings. But
he has good innings, right?
You still need length from these guys, because now you're having Sean Reed Foley go 2 innings. Like Jose says, Jorge Lopez is being overworked. Mm-hmm. Reed Garrett, who was untouchable for April, has now come back down to earth and is quite possibly going to turn into a pumpkin soon if they continue to use him like the way they've been using him.
And I like his stuff. It's just that you get concerned about that. And I think early on in the season, to Jose's point, that's really where we saw the bullpen overwork, because you remember in the first couple of weeks of the season, a lot of these starters weren't going long. And I think that has now had its effect. We're seeing it in May, and it's a huge problem. The starting pitching, I think we in the media and also Mets fans were very concerned about coming into the season. I think everybody was. Now, they probably have pitched a little bit better than some people have thought without Senga, but length is the thing. And that's why I like that Jose brought up length is a problem. I think there's some baseball fans who think starting pitching doesn't matter. No, this is why it matters, because your bullpen will get taxed. And if it gets taxed early in the season, it is going to cost you from being able to win games, to close games out, like we saw in game one of the doubleheader on Tuesday. Those things will come back to bite you. So, yeah, it's definitely an issue. The team definitely needs more length out of their starters.
The problem for me, too, is the fact that Senga is the de facto ace, because we all know, even if he would have came back healthy at the beginning of the season, this would have been a 6-man rotation building him up. He didn't get to start on normal rest until August. His last 3 starts were when he was able to ramp up. And now you're talking about a guy coming back from a shoulder injury, which, to be honest with you, I am not counting on him returning this season. I've been there, seen this. We've seen it with Jake. We saw it with, Scherzer injuries, and we've seen it with starting pitching injuries before. They keep pushing it back. This arm's sore, this part's sore. He's got to take a cortisone shot. He needs to rest. I am not counting on him to return this season at all. So if he comes back, great. I would even now, the way that this team is playing, I'm not making him come back anytime sooner. I am not rushing him to get here with the way this team is playing right now. This team has to get to 500 before I think about bringing Senga back and rushing him back.
I was going to ask you where the team needed to be. What if they're 5 games below 500 July 1st? Still no. Okay.
I see, this is the same thing with the trade deadline too. I don't want the false hope of them being a few games under 500 or 5 games back of the third wild card. I don't want them going into the trade deadline like the Angels did last year, where they bought and fell apart only a week or 2 after that and were completely out of it and traded their assets. Nope, I'm not falling for that stuff again. This team has to be maybe 1 or 2 games out of the third wild card spot, and they have to be maybe about 3 or 4 games over 500 for me to feel confident for this team to make any type of move. But, the way that they have been showing and the way they've been playing, I expected that this core group, or the so-called core group, would not be the issue of this team. And that's what it's been. And Rosie K makes a good point, going, the issue is that the vets are not the guys. None can carry the team. Lindor is not the leader of the team. It's wrong to look to him for that. The players underperformed under Buck too. He also goes on to say, I think that the style of winning baseball changed in 2023. Pitch clock, stealing bases, power bats. The Mets haven't changed the team to keep up. And this seems to happen like all the time, right? Like you go back to the 80s with the Mets, right? There was no wild card. There was no extra teams in the playoffs. So they just didn't have enough outside of 86 to get to that next point. Same thing, you go to, the 99 and 2000 teams that didn't have enough, 2006, 2015. And then, you look at all the changes, right? Like this team from the time that Cohen took over for the Wilpons had a terrible analytics group, had 1 or 2 people in the analytics team. And now they're finally building that. And now they have to adjust again because of all the new rules that are around. And this team is just always behind the 8 ball and always coming up short. And you see them coming up short. And that's this whole group from 2021, you can even go to 2019. 2019 on is a team that always finds a way to come up just short.
You felt like they had it in 22, obviously, and there was a lot of hope going in 23. But the thing I've been taking from this conversation we're having and looking at some of the comments in the chat and everything is there's a lot of disappointment. But what's the identity of this team? Because I felt like when 2022, I think you talked about it a bit, Ant. You knew they played hard. They were going to be aggressive on the base paths. You saw a lot of that, and I enjoyed watching that kind of baseball. I really did. And again, I'm trying to be fair to Mendoza on this because it's hard to establish that as a first-year rookie manager. But this team doesn't feel have an identity, and that's where I might agree with Rosie a bit on this, right? That's not all on the manager. That's on the guys in the clubhouse, the guys who are paid to be the guys, right? It's some of that is on them, and they're not setting the tone and at all whatsoever. And maybe we have to start looking at it. I'm a Francisco Lindor fan. I've liked him since he was playing in Cleveland. And, maybe he's not that guy. He's paid like he's supposed to be that guy, right? But there's a difference between being paid to be like you're that guy and being that guy. And that doesn't mean they can't win with him. Maybe there's another guy they need to get in there. Now, I don't know where that guy's coming from. I don't know if maybe it's Francisco Alvarez who eventually emerges into that guy. I'm not so sure. But I think when you look at this Mets team, what's their identity? What do they do well, right? Are they scrappy? Do they fight back? That's something in 22 you felt like you saw with this team. So that's something I think this team has to really address in the coming years is finding an identity, how they're going to play, how they're going to develop their farm system. Because like you said, there's no more time to be behind the 8-ball. What Mets fans I think should be encouraged is, yes, you have an owner who gives a damn and an owner who's willing to spend, an owner who was even willing to spend to get off his sunk costs, which I thought was the right move. And I know Anthony and I felt the same way about that. But what's the identity of the New York Mets going forward? I think that's the most important thing that has to be fostered in these next couple of years if this team is going to have any kind of sustained success. We talk about organizations like the Cardinals that another fan brought up, right? Or the Braves. I know fans don't want to hear this, or even the Dodgers. You know what their identity is. You know what they've been about. What are the Mets about? I don't think a lot of fans can say what the identity of this team is because they don't have one right now.
No, and Eddie Presti makes a good point here. I see a lot of people saying this, that I find this group extremely unlikable and unrelatable.
That's never good.
I'm not shocked to hear that.
It's not good when the fans say that either.
Nope. I saw something on Twitter. I think John Harper posted it, that he was talking to a friend, said, I don't know if I'm going to watch Mets baseball throughout the summer. Like, I don't know if I can. Like, a lot of fans are like, they're speaking out and they're just not happy about, what's been going on. I want to get to this one comment because we still got to do Darryl Strawberry.
Yeah,
and,
we will.
And there was some kind of bit of breaking news that I want to get that the chat release that I have just found that's confirmed. So I want to get to that in a second. But Spectacular Enterprise says not one person mentioned the suspect work of Chavez and Barnes as hitting coaches. Look, I don't like two hitting coaches. I don't understand the whole point of it, of having two hitting coaches in the dugout. But to me, the first move outside of trading players is that these two guys have to go, I think. At some point at the end of this, if this next 4 games against the Arizona Diamondbacks ends in this team losing 3 out of 4 or getting swept, I think that these two got to go.
I sometimes hate this in baseball. I just want to, because this is what always happens, right? Like the hitting coach gets fired or hitting coaches in this situation, which I do think is a bit ridiculous, but the hitting coach gets fired, right? And it's always the first fall guy. And I'm like, is it the hitting coach's fault? Is it coaches in the situation? Is it their fault? Is it really going to make a difference? We saw the Yankees do that. Was that last year? I can't remember, or the year before.
Yes, they brought in Sean Casey.
Sean Casey, right? They're bringing Sean Casey.
Didn't work.
Yeah. And I generally think when you get to this point in the season, I don't think the changing the hitting coach is going to do that much. I really don't. When's the last time we saw the changing of a hitting coach really spark a team? I don't recall this really ever working. And for the most of my time, I'm watching baseball. So yeah, they could do it. It's something. It's something to like appease the fans, to be like, see, we're doing something. This isn't working, so we change this. But it's like it doesn't really change or address the problems that need to be addressed. Because you can change the hitting coach, but if you still got Pete Alonso swinging at pitches right down Broadway, it's not going to matter. And I don't think one hitting coach coming in the middle of the season is going to change that. I just don't. Now, I'm not saying the hitting has been good for the poster who brought that up. I'm not saying the hitting has been good. It has not. I'm just not sure changing the hitting coach now is going to do anything. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. The last time the Mets made a drastic move, I think it was 1999. They got rid of Bobby Valentine's entire coaching staff, after going, I think they were like a 9-game losing streak. He was the only one that stayed aboard. Everyone else went. Pitching coach, hitting coach, they all went. They brought in like Dave Wallace, who to this day is my favorite pitching coach. I mean, there's been no one like him for the Mets. Not even who I call Teflon Jeremy Hefner right now, because he's been like untouchable. But yeah, that was the last time I actually saw that effect work, in a positive mode. We saw with Chili Davis, it didn't work, right? That team still stunk, and they brought in Hugh Quattlebaum and some other guy that was helping him out and doing the 2-man show, and that didn't work. And look,
you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because I almost had forgot about that, and it did work and spark that team, obviously. But I wonder if the difference, Anthony, was that you saw all those guys go, so all the players in the clubhouse had to be like, oh shoot, like the manager might be next. Some of us might be next. And I wonder if that's more of a wake-up call. I think when it's just a hitting coach, it doesn't do much. When you see a whole staff go, yeah, I think that sends a very strong message. Now, it might be a little bit over the top, but it worked in that situation. Maybe that needs to happen again. I'm not sure that will happen with a first-year manager, but I understood why the Mets did it then. And you're right. It was a very drastic move, but they got rid of basically his whole staff. And
yeah. Well, the Mets did make a move to just shortly, and shout out to everybody that's in the chat. Shout out to all you guys keeping me updated with what's going on here. And 252 people in this room. Thank you very much for watching this and joining me and Dexter. Island Time saying, wait until you see the post game from Jorge Lopez. As we talked about earlier, Jorge Lopez got ejected from the game. I thought that the umpire was a little too much with theatrical, and you know how they always like to, and as we saw, one of the most theatrical ones left the game in Angel Hernandez this past week. But Jorge Lopez got tossed from the game and then proceeded to throw his glove into the stands. Excuse me. So after the game, once Carlos Mendoza talked, the team had a closed door meeting before the players were allowed to talk with the media to address the situation. Once that ended, apparently Rosie K saying Jorge Lopez called the Mets the worst team in effing baseball, and he hasn't cooled down at all. Jorge Lopez then, like Junior Swingman, we're all thinking of what he's saying. They are right now one of the worst teams in baseball. Damn. But then I caught wind of what Armand said, Lopez being DFA'd, kind of came off of what Will Salmon said. And I'm looking it up. He has been designated for assignment.
Wow.
David Stearns not messing around, even though he was showing his emotions, speaking the truth. They weren't messing around. That comment must have gotten to Stearns and Cohen and even Mendoza. And wow, I am in shock that they have released or designated for assignment Jorge Lopez. You're looking at a bullpen that's already without Brooks Raley for the season. Edwin Diaz is out, and the guy that I thought, even though he had a not so good outing today, the guy that I thought, because he's closed in the past and had started off so well this season, the guy that I thought that was going to close has now been designated for assignment. Like, what is happening to this team right now?
I'm not sure I like any of this because, look, a couple things. He should not have thrown his glove into the stands. You can't do that. You can't do that. Like, I understand you're pissed. You can throw it in the dugout. Just don't want to hit somebody. You can't throw your glove in the stands. You can't. You just can't do it. Not unacceptable. And honestly, and look, they had the closed door meeting, and I'm sure maybe Lopez was pissed. Maybe we just talked about guys showing emotion and somebody saying enough is enough. Maybe this man said enough was enough. And I'm not against him for doing that. Now, he probably said some other choice things to some other teammates. I don't know what he said. It had to be really bad for them to DFA him. I will have to acknowledge that. He probably said some stuff that was really bad. Now, I just have a question to the person who said that. Did he speak the truth in saying the Mets are the worst team in baseball? Did he say that to the media, or did he just say that to other players, because that's what I'd find interesting. If he said it to the media, I understand where the organization is pissed about that, because they're like, look, if something is behind closed doors in a meeting and you say this to the team, people are going to be like, we'll keep this internally. But once he took it outside of the clubhouse, that probably is where they drew the line. So I understand the Mets sort of drawing the line. Now, that doesn't mean I don't agree with what we see right here on the screen from Daniel Keenan saying he did speak the truth. Now, do I think they're the worst team in baseball? A little bit hyperbolic there, but they're pretty bad. They're pretty bad. And he was frustrated. I kind of like that he got frustrated. If he said it to the media, shouldn't have done that. That's why they can't do it. I do think Rosie K is right here in that the organization has to make a stand in saying what's acceptable, because we're talking about culture here, Anthony. We've been talking about it all show with the fans. Part of building a culture is when you have to say, that's not it. That's not it. Now, I do think throwing the glove into the stands probably would have got him suspended from the team. I think it's about why he's DFA'd is a lot more than that. And I'm sure we'll find out more in the coming days. I'm going to try to look at this. If he did say this to the media, that they're the worst team in baseball, I mean, you can't give a FU to your employers and then think you're going to walk back into work the next day and everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. You know what I'm saying?
There's no doubt in my mind that was to the media. He
said it to Steve Gelbs, Rosie K is saying here.
Wow. There was no way that gets out from the team, from what we've seen during press conferences. And like I said, I stopped watching them. I'll have to go back and watch this. But from what we've seen, there's no way that gets out if that was not addressed to the media. And Rosie K makes a good point again. I do think that Stearns can properly build a team and a healthy culture. This is an evaluation year. He now knows that he has to get rid of many of these players to fix it. Here's the only problem. Like, I agree 100% with this. But with this Jorge Lopez situation, I wonder, with the Mets fans being so frustrated the way they are, and you've heard it from me, a lot of Mets fans feel the same way, of hearing the same contrite answers, the same, we're better than this. We know we're better. We just had a bad day. We'll be better. With fans being tired of hearing that, will this make Jorge Lopez a martyr because he said what the fans are feeling? And with that, initially, for now, turn them against David Stearns. Because like I said, we are ready. Like, if you suspended him, if you fined him at this moment in time, fine. This team's already on fumes, especially in the bullpen. And to get rid of him at this point in time, like, I knew he'd throw the glove and it's unacceptable behavior. But, like, we don't have a bullpen at this moment in time. Yeah, what are we doing?
And I looked it up. And he said to Steve Gelbs, if you follow Steve Gelbs, he tweeted this out. He tweeted this: I asked Jorge Lopez if he regretted throwing his glove into the stands. Not only did he say no, he then called the Mets the worst team in whole effing MLB. Not gonna curse here. He later gave him a chance to clarify, and he confirmed that's what he meant. Folks, I would tell you this. He said that. And I'm not going to mess up my money either. He said that with the SNY cameras rolling on their network that got out. Now, they obviously edited that. I'm sure they played that in the post-game show. Gary and the guys were doing that. But you basically said that to the team reporter who asked you and gave you a chance to clarify your comments, and you doubled down on it. I mean, that's what you do when you want to quit your job. When you don't want to come back to work anymore, this is like textbook of what you do. I'm not trying to make fun of this. I'm just saying there was no way they could bring him back after that. Now, Anthony, you're not wrong. It is a tough situation. Their bullpen is taxed, as we've been talking about. They're down Edwin Diaz now. They need all the arms and help they can get. I think the only thing that makes sense in this situation that would probably make Mets fans happy is bring up Jose Butto and put him in the bullpen. That might make a little bit of sense here, folks. That just might help. But honestly, after you said that to Gelbs of all people, and it was on, it was a wrap for it. It was a wrap for him.
Look, with all this confirmation from, with all this confirmation from this situation, what you have said, what we're getting from the chat, this has confirmed to me one thing that I said earlier on in the show, and that is there is something wrong in that clubhouse. Jose Butto did everything the Mets have asked him to do throughout his entire run right now. Pitch multiple innings, go into the 10th, close games. He did most of it pretty well. So the fact that he got this livid of getting tossed, then throwing his glove into the stands, then doubling down like you said. The fact that he did that only confirms to me there is really something wrong in that clubhouse. It's a confirmation for me.
I'm with you on that. Not condoning his actions, and I understand why they couldn't bring him back. But I do think that's a great point. I'm glad, and I also want to thank everybody in the chat for bringing this news to our attention and allowing us to discuss this here, which is fantastic to do. You're right. I think it only tells you there's a problem. And I always tell people, when you're talking about sports, you still have to look at this. These are guys working. These are guys doing their job. I don't know if anybody's ever experienced this, but I have experienced this, sadly, in my career. If you've ever worked around a whole bunch of incompetent people, there is nothing more frustrating than that. I can tell you that, right? And this applies to anybody in any walk of life, in any work. That's some of the frustration that sounds, to your point, Anthony, like we're hearing from Mr. Lopez here. Like, he was frustrated. This is something that was bubbling. Whenever you see an outburst like that, that's not something that just happened overnight. It wasn't really about the one non-call here, right? It wasn't about Steve Gelb's question, which was a fair one. It was about this man was frustrated what's going on. It sounds to me like I'm projecting here for him, but it sounds to me like he's like, why don't the rest of y'all care about losing here? That's what it sounds like.
Daniel Caps Keenan said Tommy Pham was telling the truth from last year. You can even go back even further, right? Like the whole, way that Epler and Buck Showalter broke up, that got out late. This whole thing with Tommy Pham. You go back even further with how Trevor May saying like players feel about coming to play in Queens. Not to mention the way Zach and Zach Short wasn't here for a long time, didn't do much, but he even said that the clubhouse wasn't great. I mean, we're getting all this evidence from players who are in the clubhouse right now. And this Jorge Lopez incident has now only stamped and confirmed the fact that there is something wrong in that clubhouse to me. And they better figure it out, because by the time we get to the trade deadline, half of this team is going to be gone. And I'm not talking about just the Severinos of the world, but you're looking at guys like Starling Marte should go. Jeff McNeil should probably be traded. Everyone outside of Lindor, which is a non-tradable contract right now, as well as Jeff McNeil. And you're talking about the kids, keeping the kids like Francisco Alvarez. Once, I don't know if you saw the stat, you were at the game yesterday, but they did post the stat of Francisco Alvarez. They were 12-8 when he got hurt. And they have been, I think, 11-21 since then. And if you notice, Francisco Alvarez was the only one on the top step, even when they were losing. Only one on the top step, only one cheering, only one with like with any urgency, even to a little extent, Brett Beatty as well, because those two guys came up and grew up together. Once he got hurt, look at what has happened to Brett Beatty. He hasn't been the same. He doesn't have that fire that he had in the first month of the season. There's a lot of warning signs here.
Yo, I'm so glad you brought that stat up to me, and they had put it up on SNY, and I didn't see that because I was at the game. But I was talking with my cousin who came with me to the game when she was bringing up that point, that she was like, I wonder if that was kind of the inflection point for the Mets in the wrong way, in that since the Alvarez injury, the team has gone down. And I told her, I said, I don't know the numbers, but I know it's clearly below 500, obviously. And Alvarez, who we know has been getting lauded by the organization for doing such a great job with the pitching staff, and people have talked about his young leadership and what he's been doing in his second year in the big leagues. The fact that you're missing, it's a good thing about Alvarez's leadership, but the fact that you're missing him that badly speaks volumes to the other players in that clubhouse. And there's a problem. I don't know if we'll ever get true answers about Jorge Lopez. And I'm going to be looking to try to see what we can talk to people about it. But this is a bad situation for the Mets. This is not a good day. There's no way, like Anthony said, that you can slice this in any kind of good way. We were trying to come here and give the people hope, Anthony. And again, shout out to all the people in the chat. We appreciate y'all for giving us the news. But this is going to make the Mets on a day where we got Diaz going to the closure. He's going to the injured list, right? Pete Alonso injures his hand. And now, and you thought it was just, he threw his glove in the stand. They'll settle that. No. He has an outburst and doubles down on it, which, again, I've never been in this situation. But when somebody does that, and he said he was unsure, to be clear, he said he was unsure what his future was going to be with the team going forward. But that sounded to me like somebody that was like, man, I don't really care if I come back to work. Like, I don't care. Like, why? And that's not good, guys. That's not good at all whatsoever. It's not good. It's not what Darryl Strawberry would have wanted.
No, not at all. Shout out to Daniel Capskeen. It's his first show. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining Dexter. Thank you for subscribing. If you're just watching this for the first time, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly. Jamaris says, get rid of the vets except for Nimmo. Like I said, everyone is up for grabs to me. And to me, I never got to see Piazza win, who I really wanted to win a World Series.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to see Wright and Reyes win. They didn't get to win the World Series. And, it goes on, right? 2015, I am not like Stearns. I am not, close with this group here. Like you can trade any of them, because to me, like I said, the name on the front of the jersey always matters more. And if you tell me that we have to win a World Series without this group, without Alonso, Lindor, fine. I'm fine with it. I just want to win a World Series at this point. You could have a whole bunch of Joey Wendells win the World Series, and I would be excited for that. Like, I just want to see one.
That might go to what Eddie was saying before, right? Shout out to Eddie Presti, and I see Ed Jemias kind of saying the same thing, is that, the players aren't really likable or relatable. I think that was the other word Eddie had used there, right? And it's players embody, when players embody a city and the fans, you see how they get behind it. We just saw this with the Knicks and their run, and how this team is behind, the fans are behind that team and love the players on that team. And with the Rangers, you're seeing that. And, when I take the pulse of the fans in what I do, and when you talk to them and you hear them and you doing your show, Anthony, and you hear fans saying words like unlikable, or they can get rid of all the vets except for Nimmo, because I think people still feel Nimmo plays really hard and is trying out there, and he's had an okay season, below his standards, but okay. When you're hearing this stuff, this isn't good, and listen, I love coming on shows like this because you get the pulse of the fan base. You get to hear what the fans are thinking. So I appreciate all the fans for checking in, because I love that, because you get to really hear. And when fans are using these words and talking about this team, it's not really about the trading, but just how they're not connecting with these players. That's not good. That's not good. And what ends up happening and hurts teams. We have to remember, we are in New York City. There's a lot of things for people to do in New York City, and a lot of ways for people to spend your money. And I'm not telling people how to spend their money. I'm not doing that. But that's the thing that owners and ownership, no matter what team in this city you're a fan of, has to deal with. It's like, look, if you don't put a good product out there, people won't show up. And what you have to understand is that people can get behind the rebuild. They just want to know what the plan is. And they want to know that players are out there fighting and trying. That's why you're seeing, I've been watching the chat. That's why you're seeing some people say, hey, man, it's all right what Lopez said. Lopez told the truth. Lopez at least was showing some passion, because people want to see the passion. They haven't been seeing the passion. And so to the fans saying that, I understand where you're coming from. I understand. Not saying his behavior was right, but I understand where you're coming from. I also understand why Lopez was frustrated. Like, two things can be true.
Yep. I think both things are true. And I think that, this is going to make him, like I said, be more of a martyr than Stearns looking like, oh, this is a Stern move, no pun intended, but this is like a Stern move to get this team going. I don't think it's going to work that way, especially now with the fan base. And we talk about the pulse of the fan base. Elizardo Valdez Jr. in caps. The clubhouse is toxic. So, I agree there. I 100% agree. And this whole incident with Jorge Lopez definitely sold me on that. Jemiah also said, keep Vientos, play him at first, trade Alonso immediately. Beatty and Vientos both need to play every day. Stearns and Cohen don't know their asses from their ass. We'll see what happens. We'll see how they handle the situation and how this trade deadline gets handled. I'm glad you brought up the Knicks, and I don't want to throw shade at Francisco Lindor. But he's kind of, the de facto leader. He makes the most money. He's supposed to be. I'm not saying he is that person, but that's the feeling that you get, right? And I'm wondering if we're kind of going into a situation where, Lindor is more reserved, right? He's more of that reserved player, and you don't really see like emotions when things are going wrong, with him. Whereas you get a young kid like Alvarez, who, like you said, already being lauded for his leadership skills as a catcher, as all that stuff. Let me ask you a question. Does this at all kind of remind you of Carmelo Anthony Linsanity a little bit?
Oh, that's not. I didn't know where you were going with that. I didn't even think about that. But I see the parallel you're making. Carmelo Anthony, who's a really good Nick, right?
Yes, of course.
Really good Nick. And I think he gave what I will say about Carmelo. Carmelo gave a damn about winning. That's for sure. I'm not saying Lindor doesn't either. I think Lindor does either. The point, the comparison I think you're trying to make, Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong. Carmelo was not a vocal leader. That's not the way he led. And I want to be very clear on that. I don't think everyone has to lead in that way. But when you don't have a vocal leader in the clubhouse and your best player, and let's give Lindor credit, he always starts off slow, but he ends up, putting together good numbers and plays every day and Gold Glove level defense and the 9 and all that stuff. But you got to find that guy for the clubhouse to support Lindor. The problem with vocal leaders too is you can't be a vocal leader and just be a role player. You got to be somewhat of you don't have to be a star, but you better be damn integral to the team where people really respect what you say, right? Because you can't be the bench player. It's got to be an everyday player, or you got to be a pitcher. They don't,
especially when you're making the most money,
right? And so it's okay if Lindor isn't that guy as a vocal leader. I think it's okay. I think what matters is, as a person building the team, and I'm not saying I know a ton about building a team, is you got to find those guys around that support Lindor in the way that he leads, so that when he can't be the vocal leader, somebody else can step up and do that. I'm just not sure who that guy is. Maybe it's Alvarez and he's developing to that guy, as I was mentioning before. But I think the point in comparison you're making with the Knicks there is an interesting one, because when you looked at that Knicks team, they never supported Carmelo with that kind of vocal leader outside of 2012, 2013, when he had a bunch of veterans around him that were able to sort of take the pressure. You had Jason Kidd in that locker room, Rasheed Wallace, big personalities and strong voices and leaders who were able to do that. And Carmelo thrived that season in that. Maybe it's a little different in baseball, but maybe that's some of the same situation around Lindor. I still think Lindor is a really good player. He's been terrible this season. There's no defending that, but I do think he's a good player. I think he leads in his own way, and that's fine. But I think the Mets need somebody that is going to say enough is enough, is what I've been saying. And I know what the fans are thinking now. They're like, Dex, that was Jorge Lopez today. Like we saw this from Jorge Lopez today, but
it shouldn't be from a reliever that comes in once every couple of days, right? Like it has to be like, it has to be the Lindor. It has to be Nimmo. It has to be an Alonso,
an everyday player like that.
It's got to be one of the everyday, not even a starting pitcher either. To me, that the mercenary starting pitchers, they don't count either. It's got to be the guys that are here and are going to be here for the long run. I'm with you. Stevie Mack says, I know it's a lame duck year, but it's still a little bit concerning. Your team is completely broken and lifeless before June. Rosie K goes on to say, Cohen Stearns have to be honest about doing a rebuild, though. So, I said this last week on my show. A lot of people have been saying that they want a full rebuild.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is this. Be careful what you ask for. Because if this team goes into full rebuild mode, this isn't the NFL, this isn't the NBA, this isn't the NHL, where players are, jettisoned up, or the first round pick is already on the team. This isn't that. There's levels of development that these players have to go through. We are still waiting for some of these guys that we've been hearing about since 2021 to develop, right? Like we've been waiting for, once you go into full rebuild mode, we're talking about like, early 80s, end of the 70s type baseball from the New York Mets, and it'll be an empty stadium. If you're okay with that, which a lot of fans probably are, then, I applaud you for that. But I'm just saying, I know because the way this team is playing so bad right now, to just go on a full rebuild. But if you're ready to wait it out, until 2028, 2029 and all that stuff, by all means do it.
The thing with the Mets is that helps them is that they're not a small market team trying to do this. So they have the cash to then plug certain holes through free agency. And I think fans also understand if they're going to go that route, they're not going to hit on every prospect because it's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. I think I see a lot of people talking about playing Vientos and Beatty, and I still think Beatty's a good player. Give him time to develop. I think Alvarez is going to be a star. I feel very confident about that, but you never know. The Mets need to think in the next group of guys that are coming up. Maybe Scott's front end of the rotation pitcher. Maybe you get between, Luis Angel Acuna, between Mauricio. Maybe you get another star in there. That's an everyday player. If you can get two out of this group that you're having, now you're cooking. If you can find a star pitcher somewhere within this group that, dare I say, is anywhere even close to like a Jacob deGrom or Matt Harvey or Noah Syndergaard that you saw in the last era of Mets pitchers that came up, I think that's realistic for what you expect with the Mets. And then can you plug in and fill some holes with free agency? Can you get some young arms in the bullpen that can do some good stuff for you? I think that's the thing. I think the path could be a little quicker because of the money the Mets have to spend if they spend it right to them rebuilding. But I completely understand why the Mets why the Mets fans want to rebuild right now. And I get it because we've used the words lifeless.
Yeah.
We just want to win, Eddie Brett, even if it takes 2 to 3 years to do.
Yeah, Eddie has been full rebuild. Excuse me. We've been talking about on Mets Evening Brew, which you can catch tomorrow at 9 p.m. But he's been talking about full rebuild, so I respect that since the beginning. He doesn't care how long it takes; he just wants to do it. And you say you have to nail some of these free agents and these signings correctly too. The problem with this team is there's no winning culture at all. And the fact that there is none is why we are going to be overpaying double for guys like that we missed out on. Of course, like a Yamamoto, who, we had $325 for him. Dodgers had $325 for him. He's going to go to the Dodgers because, well, one, it's closer, and two, they are a winning organization. Are we going to overpay for Max Fried, where he'll probably take less to stay in Atlanta or go to the Yankees or some other good team? Like, I want to get to a point where we're not doing that, and we're getting players because they want to come here.
No, I understand that. I think a lot of what we talked about in the show is about building that culture, and that matters. I think that matters a ton for the Mets fan going forward if they truly want to win. Right? It has to be about building that culture, and I think the fans here in New York and the Mets fans are smart, and they want to see that building. And so I forgot, I think it was Rosie who said about Stearns and Cole need to be honest about a rebuild. The funny thing is, I think if they do it, they will be, right? And I'm with that. Don't bullshit the fans. We don't have to do that. You can say, hey, this is what we're doing. The fans, I think I've said this before in New York. People are like, you can't rebuild in New York. I totally disagree with that. If you're honest with the fans and you let them know what the plan is, they'll be fine with it. They'll be straight with it. If you tell them what it is, because fans aren't stupid. They know this team isn't good right now. We've seen this from the fans here in the chat. Nobody's lying. Don't lie about it. Be straight up. I was fine when the Mets were straight up about selling off sunk costs last year at the trade deadline. I thought that was good. I don't think most ownership groups would have done that. Yeah. Does it help that you have an owner who could pay 70 cents on the dollar? Yes, it does. It helps a ton. And there may have to be some of that going on here, but it's crazy. We're in May and we're already talking about trades and breaking down the team. And I know it's depressing, but it may be the right thing to do. Anthony, I don't know about you, but I'm very intrigued to see in the next couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, because I don't know. And I'm sure we'll be texting, we'll be talking. But if it gets bad, and we're talking about June 15th, and you and I'm saying, Ant, come on with me. We're doing a Mets segment, and we're talking about, well, don't know. That's not. I think fans would like to see some fight by then.
Yeah.
At least show some fight. It's like, come on. You just hope it doesn't get to that, but it's not looking good. It's not looking good right now. And I don't know how Stearns and Cohen address this issue that happened today with Lopez, because I think they're going to want to deflect. I understand that's the PR thing to do here. I understand that. But I think what they need to do, I think it would be refreshing. I'll say this to the fans. If they came out and said, they're not going to throw anybody under the bus, so I'm never going to expect that. But they could say, hey, this is not, I was going to say the Mets way, but I'm not sure what that is, right? this, this is not the way we want to do things. We have to, they can use the C word here. They can say, we have to change the culture. And this has to start now. And if the players who are not going to be here in the way we want to play, we're going to go find those players. We're going to make sure we get that. We're going to develop those players. They can say a strong statement like that without throwing anybody under the bus. And I think that would have a lot of the fans who are intelligent that we see here in this chat are going to say, you know what? Okay. I still want to see what you guys do next, because the honesty part of that matters too. But okay, you said it. You said the culture that you want. You said it out loud. You said the thing that we're all talking about. All right, now go create that culture. And let's see the years and the building of that consistency to get there. You don't like that Jorge Lopez said that? Okay, what you going to do about it? Are you going to stand by and say, hey, because what the Mets fans don't want to hear anymore is, oh, we still believe in these guys in the clubhouse.
We heard it this week. We heard it this week from Stearns, and they have now lost. They lost 3 games in a row since Stearns had made that conversation.
And I get that they're not going to come out and say that they have lost faith in the guys in the clubhouse. You're not going to do that running a team. I get that. But what you can say is, to the point I'm making, is you can say that you want there to be accountability going forward. You want there to be a standard. I don't care what you do for work. Everybody wants to be part of organizations that has that. I believe in that. There's got to be a standard, right, Anthony? And like, what's the standard? People come to watch or listen to the Subway To Shea podcast, and they expect the standard. They expect the quality of product that you bring, right? Otherwise, the people that are here watching the show live would not be doing that. And it's the same thing with sports. It's the same thing with the fans. And I think there's a way to make that comment and say that to the Mets fans that I think can endear the people at the top. Stearns and Cohen can endear themselves to the Mets fans and be truly honest and have an honest discussion about that and have fans feel like they're in a good place going forward instead of just saying, hey, we still believe in the guys and make a push. Not saying to bury the guys, but just say this is unacceptable. We got to start doing some things differently. It needs to start today. It's fine to say that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I think, even to say that, we understand Jorge's frustrations. All the players are as frustrated. The front office is frustrated, but we cannot allow that type of behavior to end up making too much headlines for this team. We cannot allow that, to the fact that as well as he was pitching, we have to make an example of this to show all the players on this roster that type of behavior is unacceptable and we can't do it. So, if somehow they can combine some of that to especially all of what you said, because that was 100% on. I even think Daniel Capskeen said you're cooking. So look, this situation, it's not going to get better, right? It's not going to get better. There are going to be a lot of questions, not only to Stearns and Cohen tomorrow, but to Mendy, to the entire team. They're going to be answering questions for the next probably week or two on this, and maybe even longer up to the trade deadline.
And that's the problem, right? And that's the point you're making there too, Anthony, right? When something like this happens, and if it's not addressed in the right way by leadership, and I don't mean just addressing it by DFAing him. I mean what it means going forward, because we're talking about, we've had fans here say, oh, the clubhouse is in shambles. Somebody said it was toxic, right? These things affect the clubhouse going forward. And now players have to answer questions, and the media is going to ask good questions and the ones they rightfully should. And one of the questions that I'm positive will come up tomorrow at availability for the Mets, some reporter is going to ask it, is this clubhouse in shambles? Is there a problem here larger than what we are seeing from this reaction? Is this a symptom of a larger problem? That's a fair question to ask in this situation.
Yeah.
And I think it's a question fans want the answer to. Now, I'm not sure we're going to get an honest answer about that, but it is a fair question. And I think with all the concerns you had, Anthony, and all the concerns other fans have had, this did not make you feel better today.
No,
in any kind of way.
It's just a trickle down effect of, a nightmarish type day that has gone on for all the way from the whole Edwin Diaz situation to the loss. Everything has just snowballed, and it seems like it's not getting any better at this point in time. And I don't know. I think the sigh is just so frustrating. I know you got a little bit more time left. We got to get into Darryl Strawberry.
We do have to talk Darryl Strawberry.
Yeah, we got to talk Darryl Strawberry. I kind of want to turn this into a little bit more of a positive note to end the show at least. And you can throw some of your comments about Darryl Strawberry, some of your memories, or whatever you want to talk about with Darryl in the comments as well. Obviously, Saturday, which would probably be maybe one of the last bright moments of this season, is that Darryl Strawberry is getting his number retired. Number 18 is getting retired right now. Saturday against the Diamondbacks, a 4:10 start. I don't know if they're pushing the game back or if this is going to start a little early. They usually are on top of that with the whole, they usually get it out by Friday, how they're going to schedule this stuff. But just want to go into his career. 8 years with the Mets, 1983 to 1990. Had a 263 batting average, 252 home runs, 733 RBIs. He was the Rookie of the Year, a 7-time All-Star, 2-time Silver Slugger. Finished second in the MVP voting in 1988 and then finished third in 1990. I really thought in 1988 he should have won it looking back at those stats, but Kevin McReynolds was also on the team and they kind of split and went all the way to Kirk Gibson. But Darryl was really the start of a new era for the New York Mets back in 1980 when he was drafted. The first time I saw Darryl Strawberry obviously was in a Yankee uniform at Shea Stadium, where he hits a home run and they kind of bring the apple out, just part way up a little bit. Not so you see the Mets sign, but they did bring out the apple for him. What was your first time seeing Darryl Strawberry, whether live or maybe even just hearing about him?
So yeah, because I'm a little bit older than you, and Darryl was a huge reason for me growing up. I mean, the reason, if I'm being, it's really him and Doc, but him, that I was a Mets fan. My grandmother, rest in peace to my grandmother, she loved watching the Mets when she came to this country. Loved them. And so I remember she had got me folders we used to have from my kindergarten. I was 5 years old. I was 5 years old in 88. So I'm giving my age away there. And I had a Doc and a Darryl folder, and Darryl was my guy. I remember seeing him at 5 years old, just hitting these home runs. And, I remember when I didn't even know what a home run was. Sometimes he hit a foul ball and I thought it was a home run. But those are my early memories of him. And really it's, he's the reason why I was rooting for the Mets as a kid. It was because of him and his play. And, I was a little bit too young at that time to understand some of the struggles he was going through. Obviously, battling his, alcohol and cocaine addictions at the time. And I remember it was very sad when he left the Mets in 1990, because that's when I kind of was becoming a little bit more aware as a Met fan. And he left. But I think what I knew when I heard how my parents talked about him and my grandmother, you knew how special he was to the Mets. And he was my first favorite Mets player. So he holds a very special place in my heart. And I'm really thrilled to see him get this honor. I'm thrilled for both him and Doc this year because what he means. You talk to older Mets fans, he talked a lot about what they mean to this team. And they're a bright spot in a great era of Mets baseball, as you talked about, Anthony, when they actually were running the town, right? They were the team in the town. You haven't really seen that kind of sustained era for the Mets. But when you talk about Darryl Strawberry, you got to talk about the power, the hitting ability. Obviously, his rookie season was amazing, right? He probably should have won in 88, losing out to Kirk Gibson that year. And I think, it's hard to not talk about his career, not talk about the fact of like what should have been, not just with the Mets, but overall. This guy finished with 330 career home runs. If it wasn't for some of the issues I think he had in his career, he absolutely would have been a Hall of Famer. So it's really disappointing. But when I think of Darryl Strawberry now, I think what makes me smile and happy, not with him just getting this number retired, but also what he's done in his life to like legitimately turn it around. And I had the opportunity very early. I've met Darryl a couple of times in my career, but very early in my career, I had the chance to do an interview with him and talk to him. And he could not have been more of a gracious guy. And I told him some of the stuff I shared here, how I was a Mets fan as a kid and had his folder and all this other stuff. And he was so touched by that. And obviously he's turned his life around. And I'm very happy to see that, because that's the thing that matters the most when I think about him and Doc is we think about the memories they gave us, and what you can talk to your kids about and people who didn't get to see him, fans who didn't get to see him. But the fact that those guys seem to be doing all right, especially Darryl, with a lot that he's went through, and he even recently had a heart attack earlier this year and it's been fine. And it was good to see him out for Doc's number retirement. But the fact that he's turned his life around and doing fine, I think it should be an inspiration and testament to all of us that even when we have downs in our life, we can still, get back up. And so that's kind of the way I think about him. Besides just the memories that he gave me as a young child and just being amazed by his power and his bat speed and his ability to hit, but because he was a damn good player, man, damn good player. But the fact that he's persevered and come back and get this honor as a Met, his number definitely deserves to be retired. Sorry for being so long, but yeah, Darryl, I remember my first time seeing him, and he's always meant a lot to me. As a special place in my heart, just as a sports fan, because he was the reason I started rooting for the Mets. It's definitely him. Number 18 is absolutely the reason, for sure.
You think of Darryl as the player and all the memories that he provided for the Mets, and I honestly think the second half of his life, like you meant, the perseverance, him finding faith, him getting a second chance at life and succeeding. I think that may be more important as a person, that is more important, that he has been able to overcome, the demons and all the stuff that he's went through. And to the same certain extent, Doc as well. And like they just look so healthy and happy now. And like you said, seeing them together, I think Darryl came with like a defibrillator, like he was carrying something after having the heart attack. Just seeing him there and him and Doc embrace and that group together, you look at what Darryl did, as a Met. You look back in history from the time of inception to the 80s. And Darryl really was the first, hitter, slugger that they really developed as that, 5-tool star. Like they didn't have that beforehand, right? It was always pitching. Nope. It was Seaver. It was Kuzman. Rusty Staub came in a trade. They did develop Cleon Jones, but Cleon Jones was nowhere near what Darryl Strawberry meant to this team. Nowhere close.
No, and you know what? Another thing, I always I talked about this before with Doc. I think for me, growing up as obviously as a young black kid in Brooklyn, seeing both of those guys at that time was huge, because it was seeing people that look like me play on that stage and do it so well. And I know there's a lot of other black baseball fans who feel the same way. And I think anytime we see representation in any sport, that it means a lot to people. And I know it did mean a lot to me and for those guys. And, even with just seeing, like you said, what they went through as people. Sometimes with sports, we talk a lot about what happened on the field, off the field. But, seeing people do good in life and seeing growth in people is amazing. I think the other thing that really makes me happy about both of these guys, particularly even Darryl getting honored, is, you want to see guys like this get their flowers before they're not here anymore. Life is so short and so precious. And when you get to see those guys, especially with everything they've been through in life, get their flowers and get honored by the Mets fans for what they did in the era and where their place is in Mets history. It's one of the greatest Mets pitchers, and if not the greatest Mets slugger of all time. Right now, all-time leader in home runs, is still standing right now. It's good to see those guys for what they've done for this Mets team. So I'm glad we're able to talk about this. That makes me smile a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. With all the things that had been going on with this team, to get just this one day, this one moment, like we got with Doc last year, especially to honor the history, which, you can fault Steve Cohen for the way that this team has been put together, but you can definitely not fault the way that he has honored the legends
No,
and the
he's done a great
heroes of
job.
this organization. That's for certain. And, I even go back, like I said, the first time that I saw Darryl Strawberry play was in the Yankees, but the first time that I got to see him in person was in 2006 when they did the 20th anniversary of the New York Mets. I still remember that day vividly. They were playing Colorado. They brought out the 86 pinstripes to play that day. I thought that was such an awesome moment. But they had all the players come out from the 86 team through the stands. The only one that wasn't there was Doc at the time, and Davey Johnson wasn't there either. But there was a lot of talk about, will Darryl be there? Is he getting along with the Wilpons now? Like, is this going to happen? As soon as Gary Carter comes out and it comes down and they announce him, you start hearing the loudest roar I've ever heard from a fan base. And it's Darryl coming down and the smile on his face, high-fiving all the fans coming through the stands, and then them just announcing his name. That moment, and then you go 2 years later, even thinking about Doc, the first time he returns with the Mets jersey on and the ovation he got. Those two guys meant so much to this fan base, even with all the troubles.
Yep.
The fact that, them apologizing, the fans forgiving, just this whole thing that has gone on with this team. I don't want to say it makes for a fairy tale ending, but it makes for a really great end to, what the middle struggle was, that we are here at this point where now we get to see their numbers forever up in the rafters or up on top of the, Citi Field.
Yeah. I'm thrilled about that. I'm thrilled for those players of the era, Keith, Doc, Darryl, that even though I was so young, I was really young. So I don't want to act like I saw and remembered everything from the 80s, because I didn't. But I do know that was the start of my fandom there. And, now if I go to a Mets game and my daughter's with me, I can talk to her. Who's number 18? I could tell her, about number 18 and why he was good, and that's a beautiful thing. And for people who, I think one of the great things we have today is for people who haven't seen Doc or Darryl, go on YouTube and look at them. This, Doc, go look at that 84, 85 season, the 85 seasons. Those are tremendous. He was throwing heat. Doc was smacking bombs. And I mean, yeah, I think it's just, you talked about a fairy tale ending, Anthony. It's just seeing those guys get their day in the sun and get that roar from the crowd one last time. I mean, I'm hopefully, we'll knock on wood, we hope there'll be other times, Old Timers Day and stuff, that they'll be able to get back there. I remember being there in 08. I think that was 08 when Doc had returned for the first time. I was there around that game doing some of my first stint with the New York Post. And I remember being there, and that was the crowd was loud that day. And these guys, they were still really connected with the Mets fans, and Mets fans love those guys from the 80s. They love that team. They get so much love. And I just think for Darryl, this is going to be good. I probably take a lot of things in life and people getting their flowers. It probably hits me a little bit differently now as I get older, and I just lost both my parents in the last 5 years. So when I get to see people get their flowers, I'm happy to see that. Like, it matters a lot, because the time we have is so short, man. It's so short. So, I just want to salute those guys both, because especially Darryl, turning his life around in a multitude of different ways. And, his family will be there to enjoy that with him. I think that's so dope, man. It's so dope that his family will be able to enjoy that. I wish I could be there Saturday. I'll be out of town. Anthony, you will be there. I'm so happy you will get to be there and see that. And hopefully, maybe by Saturday, that'll make you forget about Jorge Lopez. You got to think about it anymore.
maybe it will. Before we wrap up here, I want to get to some of the comments, because they're piling in on Strawberry. We got 304 people in here. Thank you so much for tuning into this show and sticking with us. I know it's late and stuff like that, but we really appreciate this. Maureen saying Darryl's swing was so fire, looked effortless. He was a pure hitter. I still feel like around 2008, when I saw him return, I still feel like he could probably take some home runs out of the park. I really do. You look at him, he was just so, when he first came up, like thin and lanky, but that swing, like Maureen's saying, so effortless coming from him. Jemiah saying Darryl had a rocket for an arm and ran like a gazelle. Daniel Caps Keenan saying, I hated that Straw, Doc, and Cone all left. Yeah. We go through this every so often. We go through this with players leaving. I know a lot of people won't feel like that now with this group because they're not a fan of this group. But, I felt it when DeGrom left. That was the guy that I thought was going to be here be a lifer. Even forget the injuries and all that stuff. I thought he was going to be a Met lifer. That didn't happen. So I'm pretty much kind of like numb to whoever goes now. Like if they go, they go. Like you can't keep them all. But Eddie saying Darryl swing. Oh my goodness,
one of the best.
Jose Lopez Moya saying, just imagine Gooden, Darling, Sid Fernandez, Bob Ojeda going 5 or 6 innings. Preposterous. Yeah, I mean, I think it was 1985 that I want to say 13 of his 24 wins or some stat like that were complete game shutouts.
It's 85.
Complete game shutouts, right? Like it's just crazy to think of what, those guys went through back then to what they're going through now. Daniel also says, never forget from 84 to 91, 8 straight all-star teams for him. Jemiah saying Keith Hernandez had swagger. No Met today has any swagger. We talked about that. We talked about the culture and how it's
Jorge Lopez had swagger. I'm gonna say that.
Jorge Lopez has the swagger. Oh man, I wouldn't be shocked if people show up with Jorge Lopez jerseys the way this season has gone.
Oh man.
Eddie's happy for Darryl and happy he has found his peace. I think we all are at that point. Maureen saying Doc and Darryl were must-see baseball. Trying to see where else we can get in here. Rosie K, there was something special about that era of Mets baseball. That was just a little bit before me. I always say this, but I was born 2 weeks after the Mets won the 86 World Series. So not only did I not get to see the World Series, I did not get to see a little bit of the later run of that team or any part of that run. So I am hoping and waiting for something like that to come. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but hopefully they can build, and David Stearns could build to that as well. Jose Lopez Moya saying the 80s team had leadership from Davey Johnson to Mel Stoudemire, Carter, Ray Knight, Keith Hernandez. Obviously, this current team has none. We can talk about the analogies between these two teams, and I even told you off air. I sat there and watched, and I don't know how many people in the chat watched this, but I sat and watched the Darryl documentary that they put out last week in preparation for this. And just the way he talked about the way the team prepared, how the leadership was, the captain. And the thing that really got to me was 84 was the start of them turning it around. 85, they were really good. And if it wasn't for there not being a wild card, that team would have made the playoffs. But the fact that they just missed in 85, that it set them and made the entire team, the entire roster, feel like they had a lot to prove. It's definitely missing from this team. As we've seen 2022 down spiral, the rest of this group, that team was just tougher. And they just had that aura about them to get them through.
Yeah, now they did, and that's championship level teams, though, right? That obviously they win the championship next year, but they're able to respond. And look, it's like anything in life. Sometimes a down moment can fuel a team. I think a lot of Mets fans are hoping that today, maybe this is rock bottom. Maybe this fuels this team going forward. I wouldn't bet on it, but yeah, maybe we'll see.
One last comment, because we're talking about, documentaries and stuff. I don't know if you've seen this, but
I have.
Once Upon a Time in Queens, Rosie K saying really captured that era of Mets baseball. If you haven't seen that, anyone in the chat, please go watch it. It's like, I think I think they're considered that a 30 for 30,
30
right?
For 30. Yeah, I think
it's a 4-part series, 30 for 30. And I got to interview the director. Probably the most fun I had, with an interview, with someone that kind of just put this. I thought it was a masterpiece to me of what
it's great.
was putting together. If you haven't checked that out, please do check that out. It's a great documentary and really encapsulates that, like you said, that era of Mets baseball. Dexter, man, I know we were only supposed to go an hour. This is what went 1 hour and 45 minutes. I really did. I really enjoyed this. And the whole breaking news, the fact that we spent probably about 30 to 40 minutes talking about Jorge Lopez and the breaking news.
We would not have planned that at all.
That was definitely not planned. Originally, this was supposed to be a positive podcast talking about, Darryl and the history and his story. And then we were only supposed to talk about the Mets just a little bit. I was only going to talk about the team a little bit because I wanted to get us something more positive. But Diaz, injured list. Pete hurt. We don't know the future of that. And now the Jorge Lopez breaking news changed the whole show. But 309 people, Dexter, showed out with us tonight. The chat was popping. And it was great to see everyone in here. I appreciate every single one of you. Dexter, please let everyone know, what you're working on and what you got going coming up.
Yeah. First of all, thank you and salute to everybody in the chat. Appreciate you guys. Love coming on here with Anthony. I love his show, Subway To Shea. Obviously comes on with me a bunch. So, I love to support that. So thank you, Anthony, for having me and rocking with you. Coming up, I've been off for a couple of weeks, but I'll be back. We have our show, New York Sports Rapid Rundown. Anthony hopefully will be another guest on that sometime soon. Also, my basketball show, New York Got Game, which drops every Monday around noon. We will be doing a lot of stuff coming up with the Liberty, the Knicks offseason, what they're going to do with that. Hopefully some more stuff about New York baseball. I want to talk to Anthony as we approach the trade deadline and some other Mets fans and content creators that we will have in as well, too. So a lot of good stuff coming up, and you can follow me at D Henry TV. Anthony, thank you again, man. This was fun. And you know what made it fun? It was the people. The fans made it fun in the chat. They brought us the breaking news. And listen, this is how it is with shows sometimes in TV, right, Anthony? Yeah. You got to react to the news. You got to adjust and change. You did that today. And, we had fun with it. We thought the show was going to go one way, but we still had fun and went another way. You know what I mean? And that's cool. It's always good.
I started this podcast and you've been on it many times. A lot of the times it's been recorded. I posted later on audio, just started getting into video. But the fact that this chat and everyone that's in this room just kind of gets me, it just gets me going in a different direction. And I just feel, I feel more comfortable hosting now than I did way back when I started.
I can see that. I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the chat just brings a lot of the best out of me. So I thank not only them for being a part of this and for, being a part of Subway To Shea's journey that they've been a part of for so long now, but, you've helped me out in such a big way, and I can't thank you enough for that, whether it's being a part of, the Rapid Rundown or doing the shorts, and that has also helped me grow into being, I don't want to say commentator, but I guess a
guest
analyst.
Fan, we're gonna call you an analyst.
Guest analyst.
Yeah.
We'll fan.
Well, listen, and the people should know, Anthony is very good at what he does from the time we've connected, and I love seeing his growth. I love that you're doing the show live now, because I did a lot of stuff like live with previous shows, and I love doing the live shows for exactly the reason you said. It's the interaction with the fans, and you're just going to continue to grow, and you're going to continue to grow with the people. I tell you that all the time. We talk, and just going to continue to grow and build. You're doing a great job as I'm going to call it guest analyst. That's what we call it. Guest analyst.
I'm going to have to put that on my. I'm gonna have to put that on my ex biography.
I think so. You got
analyst.
That's, and if somebody has a problem, you be like Dex said I'm a guest analyst. There you go.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Appreciate you so much, everyone in the chat, everyone that's watched. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button for Subway To Shea on YouTube. You can, like it says on the bottom, on the scroll, follow the Subway To Shea podcast on X, Instagram, TikTok. A lot of shorts I put out there. There'll be some shorts from this show throughout the week. And you can follow me on X at Subway To Shea and at Ant Rivera 86. And like I said, this will probably be up. I don't know how I'm going to put it. I got to do some editing. I try not to do as much editing because you know how it is when you're doing it all by yourself, right? There's just so much you could do, but this podcast will be out probably Friday. We'll get it out there for you on audio format on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But for Anthony Rivera, Dexter Henry joining me today, all I could say is with as much confidence as possible, I like to end the show always saying, let's go Mets. So let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.